Breaking news, word from the Pentagon that on orders from President Biden, U.S. military forces have carried out airstrikes in eastern Syria, targeting infrastructure utilized by Iranian-backed militant groups. President Biden has been in office for 5 weeks. This is the first military action he has authorized. Chief White House correspondent Kristen Welker has more for us. Kristen, what do we know at this hour?
Well, Lester, we know this was a retaliatory action. As you said, late tonight, the Pentagon making this announcement that U.S. forces carried out those airstrikes. They took place in eastern Syria. And again, these were against Iranian-backed militant groups at the direction of President Biden. The Pentagon saying the strike destroyed multiple facilities at a border control checkpoint used by those groups. Now, the Pentagon calls it a, quote, proportionate military response after the U.S. says those groups fired rockets near U.S. troops inside the green zone. And these officials add that, quote, the president will act to protect American coalition personnel. Now, these strikes come just taking a step back as Washington has said it would be open to possible negotiations over Iran's nuclear program. And this could all complicate what is already a very fragile process. Now, earlier this week, White House spokeswoman Jen Psaki said that the U.S. holds Iran accountable for the actions of its proxies. So again, Lester, that is the broader backdrop as we are learning tonight that President Biden did order those attacks in eastern Syria. Lester?
All right, thanks. Let me go to Richard Engel right now, who our foreign correspondent. Richard, clearly a strong message being sent here. What more can you tell us?
Well, I think it is all about sending a message. And in this case, it is a message that President Biden and the Pentagon are sending directly to Iran. Even though President Biden wants to negotiate with Iran, he is sending a message that that negotiation does not mean that it is open season for U.S. personnel in the Middle East. There have been numerous attacks against the Green Zone in Baghdad, against U.S. and coalition military bases in northern Iraq, in the Kurdish region of Erbil. And I think this is President Biden's way of saying those attacks have to stop. The United States won't tolerate them. He personally won't tolerate them, even though he does want to negotiate with Iran. So negotiations take place in diplomatic corridors. They also take place on the battlefield. And I think we saw today the U.S. military using its might, using its military leverage to send that very strong message to Iran.
And Richard, as we know, the American troop presence has been drawn down considerably prior to President Biden taking office. So how does that limit further actions in that part of the world?
There are still plenty of assets in the area, still plenty of capability to carry out airstrikes, drone strikes, to carry out these kind of proportionate responses that we saw. It's important that the Pentagon said that this was a proportionate attack. It wasn't aiming to wipe out large numbers of militia fighters or attack any kind of civilian targets. This was aimed at infrastructure by an Iranian-backed militia, according to the Pentagon, after there have been a series of attacks against Baghdad in northern Iraq, blamed on these same Iranian-backed militias, in the context when there is an attempt to re-engage with Iran in negotiations. So I see this as absolutely the stick in the carrot and stick process of diplomacy.
Yeah, and Kristen, very quickly, did all seem normal at the White House? Any indication something was brewing?
Well, it's very quiet here, actually, Lester, and White House officials not commenting broadly on this action, pointing us to the Department of Defense that has again confirmed that the president made this direction to carry out airstrikes. But the message, as Richard said, very clear. They go into these negotiations on very strong footing. Lester?
All right, Kristen Welker, thank you. Again, on President Biden's orders, U.S. forces have carried out airstrikes in eastern Syria, targeting what the Pentagon calls infrastructure utilized by Iranian-backed militants, the first military action taken by the Biden administration. We'll have more on your late local news as well as tomorrow morning on Today. For now, I'm Lester Holt, NBC News, New York. Good evening, everyone.